Greetings, fellow legacy leaders. You ever notice that leadership, and I mean real lasting leadership, isn't a sprint? It's more like sailing across Lake Ontario or Lake Michigan, right? Some days the wind's at your back and you're gliding along, and other days you're just paddling through still waters, wondering if the breeze forgot your address. Well, that's where discipline meets faith. Because without discipline, faith becomes wishful thinking. And without faith, discipline becomes drudgery. In the book, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace D. Wattles, the author, teaches us to act in the certain way, using creative energy, not competitive one. It's not about luck or force, it's about disciplined faith, a steady belief backed by consistent, grateful action. So it's not just about money, it's about creation and contribution and trusting divine order to guide the process, supplying us with the necessary resources, including money, consistent with our faith and discipline that we will need to accomplish the goals that we have. Wallace D. Wattles wrote that you must not act hastily nor too slowly, but in a certain way, steadily, intelligently, consistently, and with unwavering faith. There's a lot of things involved there, kind of like a golf swing, right? But that's legacy leadership. It has to be steady with intelligent action, rooted in gratitude, integrity, and trust. There are no fits and starts. There's no boom and bust. There's no chasing shiny distractions either, right? Oh, squirrel. We must focus. And the discipline doesn't clock out at 5 p.m. or start only at 8 a.m. It continues through evenings and weekends in all conversations, reasonings, and choices. Not, extremely, but always in our consciousness. So it's a thank God it's today, every day, 7 days a week, within the context of our desires and goals and ambitions. That's how evolution becomes sustainable and stress tolerant. You're going to have stress and there's going to be stressors, but they will be more manageable when there is this consistent approach of doing things in a certain way and where you remain humble, equanimous, detached, and purpose filled so that you can feel fulfilled every day. There won't be that lull, low on Mondays or the day after, so to speak. Simon Sinek puts it this way: it's an infinite game. We've heard that when he wrote the book. And he could have added continuous to that line. It's a continuous infinite game, as there is really no letting up. Rest, yes, you can reflect and recharge and all that, but there's no stopping, there's no quitting per se. You don't win at leadership, you just continue it. At least this kind of leadership that we're pursuing here. And you live it every day as as your natural you, and it's not stressful. It's not tiring. And then so that you can pass it on. We're not just building a business or an enterprise within an organization here. We, individually and collectively, are building legacies. Our legacy, your legacy, my legacy, from parent to child to grandchild to great grandchild, mentor to mate, friend to future. This is to newer generations. This is the type of leadership that we are pursuing as our legacy, alone, together, or with everyone that we can think of. Discipline, then, isn't punishment. Never. It's never drudgery. It's a loving devotion to the craft, the cause, and the people, and to the God that we serve within our faith. Now, a little confession time here. I've been called eternally optimistic, as we've said before, and that's mostly true. But, optimism without pacing, that's like trying to toast bread with a blowtorch. You'll get the results, but just not the kind you want. So there has to be pacing. And I know that's hard to do at times because you kind of get in a groove and you go fast, and then you got to slow down because you got to rest. But as much as we can, it needs to be still paced. Because I've literally run out of gas more times than I can count. Sometimes in cars, literally, and too many times in cars, as a matter of fact, when I was younger anyway. And then sometimes even in leadership. I've also driven fast to make up time. You're trying to catch up, but only to end up making up new swear words when you get stuck in the traffic. And then meeting a few nice police officers along the way. Thank God they were nice. But that's when I realized that pressing too hard can actually break things, and sometimes even people, let alone wasting more time in the long run. So now I work daily to balance passion with patience and ambition with purpose, to practice this gentle faithing through the hard facts, having faith to get through the realities of life. Because leadership isn't about going fast, it's about going far in our case. And for me, this leadership is to live beyond my passing, the next generation's passing, so that it goes on and on and on. And again, here's the real key, again and always, it's that C word. No, not that bad C word, but it's the good one, communication, right? As in continuous caring communication, right? CCC. And then, of course, TAC and DWC and HOC and then even CDC. Because discipline without compassion becomes cold compliance. And that's why communication is so key. Legacy leaders talk, not to control, never to boast, but it must always be to connect. They ask once, they listen twice, and they follow up three, four, five times if necessary to keep things on track, to connect, not to micromanage. And we have to learn to see that from our leaders too. Consistent communication isn't management, it's the maintenance needed for the human spirit to keep that pace alive, that pace going. That's why we can't have these dips, and the valleys and then the peaks. And it's got to be a little bit more consistent as much as we can. It's not always easy. And then when people feel heard, because that would can be accomplished through this communication, they don't just will give effort then, but they will also give their heart. I once asked a teammate, so how do you feel about your new workflow? And he said, well, I feel like a squirrel in traffic sometimes. I'm committed, but I feel a little terrified. Don't know which way to turn sometimes. And that's when I realized that discipline isn't about pushing people harder either. It's about helping them, lifting them, empowering them to feel safer while we evolve together. So that communication that we do diligently and often must also be tempered so that it's given and received in the right context, right? Abe Lincoln once said that discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Jim Rohn says and adds success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day. SES, that thing again. And of course, the infinite game, players play to just keep on playing. It's not about winning, it's about playing. Can you guess who said that? Yeah, Simon Sinek. And my dad, he didn't say a lot out loud per se, but he modeled a lot, especially to me. And I've figured out that you can't lead others to peace if your engine's always redlining. And he did a lot of redlining in his day. And I did see him break a few spirits along the way, especially in his early years and in those old days and old ways when that was the practice. So it wasn't about just winning, and it isn't about just winning anymore. It's about the pace and the flow and the continuity. So here's our challenge this week, then. I know this is a longer one, but bear with us. Let's reflect on our rhythm. Are we leading like a sprinter or like a symphony conductor, right? With that pace. Let's start small if we need to, recommit to one daily discipline or maybe a new one, something that will build strength in us without draining our spirit. Maybe gratitude journaling or a check in with a teammate or maybe just breathing. Like the Let Them author, Mel Robbins, in one of her chapters, I believe, she uses this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method before reacting, counts down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, then reacts or does something that you had fear for. And, instead of doing something that won't serve you, right? Oh, and then that occasional morning after emptiness that we get from time to time, those will kind of go by the wayside when we have this pace better through all the days. Ah, yes. Maybe that comes from a lack of focus or purpose and clarity, even. Or maybe even it's guilt or shame or regret. We don't want those. They don't serve us. We must reframe them, reset the mind, and evolve the act or habits. Those can be literally kryptonite issues to legacy leadership. Those types of things, the regret, the guilt, and all that, they can shrink by 10x what our faith expands by just 1x. So, very important that we follow those up. Let's breathe, let's trust, let's communicate, stay the certain way course, keep evolving one consistent small step at a time. Because legacy leadership isn't a phase. It's not a fad. It's a forever thing. Because in the end, the thing that will endure the longest and the most, that real legacy is you.